Hi, it's Mini David Bowie again. Last time on Amity Tracks, you heard an expertly done ranking of my records from numbers 27 to 11. But now, it is time for the real thing, the top 10 Bowie records here on Amity Tracks. Hey guys, welcome to the final video on Amity Tracks of Bowie Week. We've been covering David Bowie all week. It's been a lot of fun. And I think this is the grand finale, right? Where I give you, in my view, the top 10 David Bowie albums of all time. And also want to talk a little bit about live albums. Not every one, but kind of what I think are the most essential live David Bowie albums, because there's some important ones. If you missed the previous video, we counted down from number 27 to 11 of his studio albums. But here we are in the top 10. Let's get into it. At number 10, I do have his final album, 2016's Blackstar. An album that really can't be separated from his death, right? He recorded it pretty much knowing that his demise was coming. And, it was released, if I remember right, he died about 2 days after this thing came out. And, obviously some of it does, involves kind of looking back and looking into the void, and especially these last two songs, right? Dollar Days and then I Can't Give Everything Away. Pretty poignant stuff. But, creative to the end, he put together this group of really kind of interesting, younger, kind of jazz influenced musicians. Pretty complex tracks. Blackstar is about 10 minutes. Lazarus is about 6 minutes. It's very interesting, I think, textured, complex tracks. He sort of leaves us with this gift. I consider myself fortunate because I, I think I would forever be wondering, does my love of this album, is it colored by the fact that he dies, and so that sort of puts this in a special light. Like I said, I think I got lucky because I bought this the day it came out, before he died, obviously, and listened to it thoroughly several times in the couple of days before his death. And so I already started to form a pretty strong opinion of it prior to that. And then he died. And so I feel, what I'm saying? I feel a little more confident here in saying that this really is that great of an album, like I said, even prior, to his demise. But it can't be separated from that. And I don't know, it makes it more poignant listen in some aspects. But also kind of shades it as well. But Blackstar, one of the rare times where an artist sort of has forewarning that this might be it, and so uh, pretty remarkable where they can make kind of a final statement and sort of knowing that it might be the final statement. And man, he hit it out of the park. This is a fantastic record. Love it. What a departing gift. Number 9, coming in and up from 1974, I have Diamond Dogs. Of course, with the rather disturbing album cover, album art. This one at times I've seen kind of be dismissed. This is the very tail end of his, kind of glam period. Mick Ronson's already gone. Um, I've always really, really liked it. And it's a kind of interesting backstory. He wanted to make this sort of concept album, this kind of dystopian concept album, uh, you know, loosely based on George Orwell's 1984. The story goes he couldn't get the rights from the Orwell estate, and so he kind of tossed aside the explicit concept album idea, but sort of vaguely still some of that subject matter. I mean, you have well, the song 1984 is on here, and Big Brother is on here, but you know, just sort of still generally kind of this interesting kind of futuristic thing. Some real gems on here. I mean, obviously Rebel Rebel, that's the hit off of here, and 1984 was kind of a lesser hit, but both fantastic songs. That guitar riff in Rebel Rebel is just classic. Sweet Thing, I think, is a hugely underrated song. That's just fantastic. The song Diamond Dogs is great. So yeah, this is. I think I don't hear running out of gas at all on this, even though that was sort of you know the accusation, because he would sort of shift gears after this record. I think it's fantastic. All right, number 8. I do have something from the '90s here. My buddy Tim, who's a huge Bowie fan, I think will be happy to see this in my top 10. He's a, he's a massive fan of this record, and we've had many a conversation about it. And I do have at number 8, 1995's Outside. Reunion of sorts with Brian Eno. Ambitious, concept album, kind of this futuristic murder mystery thing. I don't know. Honestly, I don't follow the story too closely. I just think the music's fantastic. The songs, individual songs, are fantastic. It's got this great kind of noir mood throughout, but really great individual songs. Outside is a great song. The Heart's Filthy Lesson, which was a single, is great. Um, what else is really good? Hello Space Boy is great. I have not been to Oxford Town. A great groove to it. What else is great here? Oh, Strangers When We Meet. If you watch the previous video, that song actually originally appeared on Buddha of Suburbia. Such a great song, he decided to put it on here too. Good move. Like one of his best songs from the '90s on. And I even dig the little kind of you know intersong narration stuff that he puts in here. That some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. I don't know. It just creates this great mood. I This is a divisive album, in some ways. I mean, there are some people who don't think it's great at all, but then there are some friends, or some people like my friend Tim who just thinks it's absolutely brilliant. I'm more on that side of it. I think this is, from the '90s on. I think this is his greatest album, as you'll see, because I don't have anything else from the '90s here from here on out. So there you go. All right, at number 7. I have one of his 2 masterpieces released from 1977, Heroes. Now, I think some people might put this ahead of the other one, but the other one's coming up. But I like the other one a little bit more. But Heroes is still brilliant. Still brilliant. Speaking of Brian Eno, loosely referred to, as part of the Berlin trilogy, right, which is Low, Heroes, and Lodger, which are basically Bowie collaborations with Brian Eno. And this is the most Berlin, I think, of them all. I mean, the song Heroes, which many consider to be perhaps his greatest single song. It's hard to argue. Um, it was really written just perfectly inspired by the Berlin Wall and this couple he saw out there or whatever. But I mean, those of you familiar with these records, Low and this one, kind of have a similar structure where the first side are songs, kind of traditional. Well, they're not traditional songs, but songs with vocals, lyrics. And a lot of the second side of both of those records are more kind of ambient, instrumental stuff. Um, and I think really where Brian Eno really steps in. But we talked about the title track, of course, but man, Beauty and the Beast, Joe the Lion, um, yeah, that's just great stuff. I like V2 Schneider. That's a great song. But yeah, awesome, brilliant. I just think the other one's a little more brilliant, as you'll see. Now, number 6. This might be the one I get hosed the most on in the comments. With the villagers coming after me with the torches and the pitchforks. But it is what it is. Um, this record was my entryway into David Bowie. It was like my gateway drug, right? and just based on my age, it's sort of where I discovered David Bowie, and I think it was because of the excellent, huge hits off of this record and the videos on MTV. Of course, I'm talking about 1983's "Let's Dance." Yes, I have "Let's Dance" this high on my Bowie rankings, number 6. Uh, I mean, I'd say I'm sorry, but I'm not. No apologies here. I think this is a fantastic album. Well, like I said, one is my first David Bowie album. So that's part of it. But I think it's legitimately fantastic. It was a huge hit where he really just decided to kind of go for the commercial pop jugular, and man, did he do it. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. Where he teams up with Nile Rodgers, right, of Chic, and it's really those two guys kind of putting this together. Killer singles: "Modern Love," "Let's Dance," and "China Girl," a song that he had co-written with Iggy Pop. "China Girl" is one of my very favorite songs. That line, "I'm feeling tragic like I'm Marlon Brando," maybe one of my single favorite lyric lines ever. Just in the way he delivers it. It's so great. That whole little kind of interlude there where he's talking about, colonialism, and it's just so great. Anyway, those 3 singles are killer. And what's interesting about the song "Let's Dance" is it's really so sparse. I mean, listen to it. There's a lot of space in that song. There's not a ton going on, but what is going on is just perfect. Um, his sort of reworking of the song "Cat People," which from the film "Cat People," I think is killer on here too. His cover of "Criminal World." So those 5 songs, the 3 singles plus "Cat People" and and "Criminal World," are to me are just top notch. Love those. The other tunes, "Without You," "Ricochet," and "Shake It," a little more throwaway. Although Ricochet's interesting, he was trying some stuff there. Now, you can't talk about this record without mentioning Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? Famously, he plays lead guitar on this record. Bowie, I think, along with Mick Jagger and some others, were blown away by Stevie Ray Vaughan's set at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And then Bowie approached Stevie and said, "Hey, you play on my record," which is a brilliant move. I've always characterized this as like Stevie Ray Vaughan is is like a square peg trying to fit into a circle. Like, he doesn't fit on this record, but it adds some interesting tension on there, and he does the best he can. And it's just so it just makes these songs the right amount of off kilter with Stevie's blues licks thrown in on this glossy pop, and it's cool. That's an interesting thing. When Bowie was going on tour for this, he asked Stevie to, be in the band. And Stevie initially said, yeah. But he said, give me the opening slot with my band, to open the shows. And Bowie wouldn't do it. So Stevie Ray Vaughan said, well, I'm sorry, man, I'm not going to do it. And so, Stevie never went on tour with him. But anyway, love this record. All right. Number 5. Now, from here on out, to me, these 5 are 5-star albums. Pretty much perfect. So at number 5, I got 1973's Aladdin Sane. There you go. Often referred to as Ziggy Goes to America, right? Because this was the follow up to Ziggy Stardust, the Ziggy Stardust album, and he wrote a lot of this while on tour in America, and so some of these songs kind of reflect you know, his observations on the road, right? Stuff like Panic in Detroit, Drive In Saturday, stuff like that. This is fantastic. I mean, this in some ways a little more daring than the Ziggy album, I think. I mean, Aladdin, the title track, that epic, just out there piano solo slash freak out from Mike Gerson. Am I saying that right? Um, is just mind blowing. I love playing that song for people for the first time, and like, even if it's just in the background, once that piano thing going, they sort of stop and like, what's going on there? It's just so great, so great. That guitar crunch on Cracked Actor, my God, that's awesome. The Gene Genie, that was kind of probably the biggest hit off there. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the perfect follow up because it's still kind of Ziggy-ish, kind of glammy, but it takes the next steps and does some more experimental things, and I think it's awesome. Coming in at number 4, I just talked about recently because we this last week we just put up my best of 1976, and so this is 1976's Station to Station. So, like I said, I just talked about this a little bit, but I say it again. Um, the beginning of his experimental period, he was kind of famously so coked up during this era. Later on, he admitted it, like he didn't recall recording this at all. This is still brilliant. And like I kind of feel like repeating myself, but the last week's video, but like I said about the the opening title track, that 10-minute, just progressive, experimental. I mean, so bold. Love it. As I said, Golden Years is probably one of my very favorites of his hit singles. Love Golden Years. Word on a Wing is gorgeous. Stay just rocks. God, that guitar work on there. Wild in the Wind is great. My least favorite song is actually TVC 15, which was the other hit, the other single off of here. That's the only song on here I don't love as much. But yeah, Station to Station, baby. Okay, top 3. Getting nervous? Huh? At number 3, I have 1971's Hunky Dory. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a fairly recent convert. I mean, obviously, I've had this for years and years and heard it for years and years, but for whatever reason, it hadn't hit me so strong until pretty recently, actually. And this is it's interesting. There's not another Bowie album that sounds really like this. It's kind of his sort of folkish, but a little glammy in there. It's interesting, but just great, great, great songs. Changes, Oh You Pretty Things, Life on Mars, which is one of his most gorgeous songs. I remember when I first heard that song, I was blown away by that chorus, his vocals on that. Kooks is cool, it's kind of a song, when his child was born. Um, Andy Warhol and Song for Bob Dylan and Queen Bitch, all great sort of sketches of these individuals. The Bewley Brothers, yeah, it's cool. Fun little fact: the piano player on here is Rick Wakeman, of Yes, you know, and he doesn't. It just sounds nothing like Yes, and he's playing straight piano on here. It's great. The piano work on here is fantastic. So there's a little shout out to Rick Wakeman's work on here. And it's surprising because it doesn't sound like it. All right, top two. Those of you who have been following along all along know which two are left. What's it gonna be? It's close, but not really. But it was close. Yeah, it's close. I do have at number two, 1977's Low. The first in the Berlin trilogy, the first in the collaborations with Brian Eno, and I think the best, obviously. Um, God, what do you say about this record? If you're in the right frame of mind listening to this thing, it'll blow your mind. The songs with vocals are so brilliant because they're like song fragments. It's just so cool. These little jagged fragments of songs, Breaking Glass and What in the World, Sound and Vision. My favorite of the songs, with vocals, is Always Crashing in the Same Car. I love that song. Man, but then the instrumentals are, in comparing this and Heroes, I love the instrumentals on this a bit more than the ones on Heroes, which is probably what put this above Heroes for me. But yeah, opening with Speed of Life and the New Career in a New Town, and then the whole second side. Man, I mean, genius, brilliant experimentation. Influenced by a lot of the stuff coming out of Germany. Some of the krautrock, stuff. But to me, very listenable too. Maybe I have more broader mind. I don't know, but it's awesome. What's left? Right at number one. I mean, it's a generic choice, but what can I say? The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. For 1972. I say it all the time, and you hear other people, call this album or that album. This is a perfect album. This is a perfect album. This really is a perfect album. I mean, every second is just perfect. It's a perfect album of perfect albums. I mean, everything is right. The concept, the musicians on there. Mick Ronson's great guitar work. Bowie's persona, the songs themselves, the track order, the flow of the everything, absolutely works here. And just the opener, 5 years. What a bold opening with just that kind of slow fade in with the drum beat, and just that it slowly builds and builds to where Bowie is just like screaming at the end. It's so great, and then going into that, shifting the rhythm there, going into Soul Love, and then Moon Age Daydream with the guitar work in there. Starman, it's a perfect single. Then It Ain't Easy, Lady Stardust, Star, Hang On to Yourself is a great rocker. And then you're going to close with this trio of songs, Ziggy Stardust, one of the great guitar riffs ever. And then Suffragette City, which just rocks. And then Rock and Roll Suicide, closing the album. I mean, it is perfect. Perfect. All right, guys. That's my rankings of Bowie. Hope you enjoyed that. Well, let's spend a few more minutes here before we kind of wrap things up and talk. I want to talk about live albums because in the first Bowie video we talked about that documentary Moon Age Daydream. We talked about compilations, and then the second video, and then most of this video we've been just ranking his 27 studio albums. But you got to talk about live Bowie. I'm not going to hit every one. Especially some of the archival stuff that's been put out. But I just kind of want to hit some major ones. I think I have about 6 here I just want to mention. We'll start with this. I actually have this on CD, but live in Santa Monica, 72. This is the Ziggy Stardust tour. And It's notable because it's raw, and it's taken from a radio broadcast, so the sound is good, but you can tell it's not like in a studio. But I think it's notable mainly because it, it's it's so raw, and it's kind of cool to hear these songs, stripped away of some of the kind of studio niceties. I mean, I prefer the studio versions. I just think they're perfect, but this is good. Now, I don't have the next one I want to talk about, but it was kind of his first official live release, and so David Live from 1974. Editor can throw the album art up there. Yeah, I just mentioned it because it is his first official live album. I don't, his reputation is not very good, and I think the reputation is fairly accurate. It was kind of this transition from Ziggy into this, sort of the plastic soul that would, come into Young Americans. But yeah, it's not great. But the next one I want to talk about is actually my favorite of all of his live albums. And this was released as later as an archival release. God, it's great. I've got this on vinyl here. This is well, live Nassau Coliseum '76. So the Station to Station tour. Great double album here. Man, this is killer. This is killer. These versions of these songs like live up to the originals. I don't know if they ever better them. Although Stay on here, I think may better the studio version of that. And the Station to Station on here is just wild. Uh God, this is good. Yeah, this is fantastic, and I love that cover art. That's just gorgeous stuff. Let's see here. Next one I want to mention, I got to go back to the CDs here, would be Stage. This was, I think, on the Heroes tour. It's interesting. I actually find most interesting sort of his renditions, because he's kind of deep into his, low and Heroes era, but um, kind of revisiting some, he does this kind of little mini set of stuff going back to the Ziggy days, which is sort of interesting in this context. Now, the whole first disc of this I think this is an expanded edition, but the whole first disc of this is all low and Heroes material. I don't think any of it bests what's on the albums, but it's an interesting listen. All right, real quick here, just kind of wrap it up. This is cool. I'm glad this came out. I don't think he ever put this out on vinyl. It just came out on CD. But this is from the Let's Dance tour, the Serious Moonlight Live 1983. I remember this was all over because this was all over HBO, and I think you could buy it on VHS, and so finally put it out on CD a couple years ago, which is cool. Again, not besting any of the original versions, but a great time capsule, I think, capturing that era. And then finally, I'd like to mention, and I downloaded this off iTunes, just burned it on CDs, so I don't have the actual album art, but editor can put it up there. But a reality tour 2003, and it was put out 2010. I think, well, first of all, it's very good. It's a nice overview of his whole career, and it turns out to be from his final tour. So it's notable, sort of, the last time he went out there and did shows. This is what he was presenting, and he kind of picks tunes from all eras. So it's a nice record. Well, all right, guys. Hope you've enjoyed Bowie Week. Please do in the comments. You know, what, what's in your top 10 Bowie? What live albums do you like? Let's talk Bowie. And please do subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate it. Like the videos, all that good stuff really helps us do what we want to do. And we'll see you next week with some new content. Not David Bowie. We'll move into some other things. But we'll see you next time. Thanks.